Hey guys, so excited to see you and to be here with you. My name's Amy Kushner. I started my career in real estate at Keller Williams, and that was back in 2014. I guess almost 8 years, 7 years and change, I've been in real estate. I've personally settled about 600 transactions. I worked with an investor base and also Sphere, and it was a crazy and wild ride. And in that time, I was pushed to, like a very growth driven person and had to learn systems and, of course, adopting Keller Williams systems and models and all of the classes that were available, all learning how to deliver the best options and resources for my clients, as well as find some semblance of a life inside of all of that. Some months I settled 10, some months I settled 20, and some months I didn't sleep much at all. But in that time, I learned an incredible amount about client service, showing up, what it takes to have boundaries and standards and expectations and how to deliver on a high level. And also like what's really important to me in doing all of this. One of the things that was a pivotal game changer for my business and also for the service that I was able to provide was understanding how to negotiate. And I think I had a lot of myths and, incomplete and incorrect beliefs about the negotiation process. And what I learned was it's really a gift. It's a gift and a dance. And it's an opportunity through strong communication skills and some generosity and flexibility to really find something special in that relationship between you and your client and you and your co-op agent. And out of that, I really started to enjoy the process so much more. When you already have a strong relationship with your client and then building strong relationships with your co-op agents, it becomes such a rich experience for everybody involved. And you're really able to move mountains together as a partner. And amazing things then happened for the client. So I'm excited to be here and to share with you what I've learned. And I definitely would like to have it be interactive. If you guys have questions or want me to go back, slow down, go deeper, let me know what you need. So this experience can be a tool and a resource for you to have a game-changing night of information as well. Sound good? Okay. So first thing, what we'll focus on, there's two parts of business. There's growing your business and running your business. And I would say there's actually a third part, and that's growing yourself. Tonight, we're going to focus on negotiating contracts, which is the third part of running your business. Everything all ties in together and it's all very evenly woven, but this is the focus for tonight. We're going to break down the common points of a negotiation, and I'm actually going to go pretty deep in this. We'll get started with this part, and then we'll examine three Ps, the three Ps approach to negotiation, analyze counter tactics. We'll do some real play, recap, create your success list, and also daily success habits. Things to consider: how your ability to negotiate can affect the outcome of the deal in a huge way. What some of the ways are that you negotiate in your everyday life, skills that great negotiators possess, and why asking questions is important in negotiations. Does anybody have kids in this group? Have you guys noticed how every conversation with your child is a negotiation? anything that they want. They're relentless about it. That's great practice in developing these skills. My son came up to me and wanted a new lacrosse stick. And I was like, okay, what's important to you about that? And he took a step back and he's like, that was a new approach. It stopped him in his tracks. Things like that. The practice of negotiation skills and the conversation around it doesn't just have to be tied to your, submitting an offer in real estate. The way of really developing that skill is being able to practice not on paying customers. So script practice and role play between, having a partner to do that, and also get into the practice of asking questions, and we'll go through the strategies for that. Let some more friends in. Brainstorm. I want to hear your ideas. Negotiation issues. So let's talk about, if you guys want to come off mute, let's talk about what some issues could be. Once an offer is made, there's 3 possible outcomes. An offer can be accepted, rejected, or countered. If the offer is rejected or countered, that's where negotiation skills can really shine. So I'd love to hear, we're not going to break into small groups because I'd really like to have a large group conversation. I'd love to hear any ideas on, like brainstorming negotiation issues that have the potential of coming up, or any potential issues that concern you. Leslie, you raised your hand.
Yes, I think that one of the things that could come up is that somebody is not willing to bend at all, regardless. Maybe the seller is refusing to negotiate anything. They're standing firm on that, even if there's a problem that arises.
Yes, definitely. If you have one party who is not flexible at all, that's definitely an issue. And we can come up with some strategies around that. And that could be your client, it could be your co-op, it could be, if you're the buyer's agent, it could be the seller. There are so many different there's so many different players in the conversation, and somebody's lack of willingness to budge is definitely a challenge in many directions. Anybody else? One thing that I noticed many times is you submit an offer as a buyer's agent, and then the negotiation actually starts when you submit your offer. So go ahead.
I was gonna ask, would poor communication skills cause negotiation issues? Like somebody
Absolutely.
like somebody didn't get like the information properly, or
yeah, or even if they I can't tell you how many times my agents, so now I'm the team leader of the Canton office, and I coach our agents in the office. I can't tell you how many times our buyer's agents have come to me like, hey, we submitted an offer and I haven't heard anything. Or the listing agent just rejected. Well, rejecting an offer and not asking for a counter is horrible communication, right? Like every offer has a potential of being negotiated to find a win-win. But if you don't engage in the conversation, then you can never get to that point. So a lack of communication or poor communication is definitely a potential roadblock. And we can talk about strategies for that too. Anything else?
As a seller's agent, is there an issue when now that we see the market is like so many offers and multiples, could that be an issue if you have 100 offers or 20 or whatever, overwhelmed with the amount of offers?
Yes. Is that my angel?
Hey, Amy.
A baby. So yes, if you have, and this again goes back to or boils down to poor communication, or really like, we'll remove the judgment from it and not call it poor communication skills. We'll just call it limited communication skills or limited experience. If you've got a listing agent who hasn't done a lot of this, or hasn't had, reason to develop communication skills to this level of having to communicate with all of the buyer's agents that have submitted offers, and then be able to compile them and put them into a format to be able to present to the seller, and then communicate through the value and the benefits of each one, and then going back and negotiating the ones that are the top choices or have the most potential. That could definitely be a challenge. So in that situation, as the buyer's agent, like, think of all of the work that you have on your plate and the opportunity that you have through very strong negotiation skills, and through asking questions to overcome the limitation of what's facing you with your co-op agent, and really embracing it and looking at it as the potential for how to partner and how to play matchmaker and help your buyer have their dream home and have the seller have the experience, for what they need and feel they deserve. And it's emotional on every side. So of course you've got to deal with the emotions too. That could also be an issue in the negotiation, is all of the emotions. Anything else? Let's get going. Common points of negotiation. Common points typically fall into two categories. It's either pricing or terms. And while the sales price is the primary factor in negotiations, it's not necessarily the bottom line. So in situations where the seller receives multiple offers, like Angel was just saying, and that sit at the same price, it's the terms of the offers and also sometimes like how it's presented, in addition to the buyer's financial position, that determines which one wins. It can determine which one wins. There can also be outliers in places where the highest net offer doesn't necessarily always win. And sometimes it's how the buyer's agent can communicate that and how you can present that to the seller. The terms of any offer may be financial, time-based, or both. When a buyer and seller can't agree on a sales price, sometimes other things can come into play. Closing costs, closing date, conveyances, what goes along with the house, earnest money deposits, repairs. Can you guys think of anything else that you might, as a seller's agent, watch for, or as the buyer's agent, offer when you're submitting your offer to make it the most appealing possible? Settlement date. Sometimes your broker is not going to like this, but sometimes buyers will offer rent back or free rent back. Right now, that's something that's helping to be very competitive. Paying transfer and recordation costs so that the seller doesn't have to. Having flexible settlement dates. All of these things. It's important to know, or if you can know, what's important to the seller if you're the buyer's agent. So if you're able to ask the seller's agent, the listing agent, are there factors that are of priority to the seller? Like, is settlement date important to them? Is there a settlement date or is there a move date that would make this more favorable for them? That's something that can help you, that wouldn't cost you upfront. Maybe they, want to settle sooner, they want to settle later. You have no idea what their situation is. If they're moving, especially right now, they might want to do the holidays in the house, or they might want to get out before the end of the year holidays so that they can be settled into their new place. You have no idea, but asking those questions will unlock all sorts of opportunities for you. Any questions on this part? Negotiation tips to respond to common points. We're going to do this in a group rather than going into breakouts. The instructions are suggesting that you look at page 5 in your participant guide and select one of the common points of negotiation, price, or one of the listed terms, and write down your choice. And then brainstorm a list of how you might respond to that negotiation point. So let's do this as a group. So if conveyances was a common point of negotiation, how might we strategize to make that an effective point to negotiate? Anybody confused by the question? I can ask it another way.
Are you saying that we should specifically just outline, what stays and what goes, make sure it's specified? Is that what you're talking about as far as like light fixtures or window treatment?
Right. So let's say there's a very heavy piece of furniture in the house, and it could be like it's something that well, actually, Angel, give me a scenario.
You have a person who fell in love with a chandelier
Okay.
in the home and want to make sure that they get it with the house.
Okay. So what would be a strategy? I'm putting you on the spot, and I appreciate you being willing to do this with me. What's a way that you would offer to include that? Hold on for 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
As a buyer's agent?
Yeah, as a buyer's agent, how would you ask for that chandelier? Or how would you put it in the offer for the chandelier?
Not sure. Like that's something so like I wouldn't know. Like you would have to list it as things that come with the house. So as a part of the terms.
So typically chandeliers do, unless
someone specifically.
Exactly.
Okay.
So typically, that's why I was asking, like, what's the scenario around it? Because typically chandeliers are included unless the seller specifically states that it's, that it doesn't convey.
Okay.
And that would be in the listing agreement, and also should be in the listing.
Okay.
If it's listed that it doesn't convey, you could always ask.
Okay.
And you could always, if it doesn't have sentimental value, it becomes part of the potential negotiation if that's something that the buyer wants.
Okay.
So then a strategy is to ask questions and to understand, buyer's agent calls seller's agent and says, I see that the chandelier does not convey. Are there any terms in which the seller would be willing,
okay,
the buyer would like to purchase with the house? So asking those questions.
Got it.
So let's talk through some other options. Closing costs, closing date, and the other conveyances, EMD, repairs. Any strategies or even questions on how to do that? I'm happy to give you guys some language to practice.
Yes, can we discuss closing costs?
Absolutely. Can you give me a scenario that you would like some strategy on?
So say you have first-time home buyer and they do not have a lot of savings, but the seller, they settle on a house, but the seller is not offering closing. what would be the best way to approach that?
So there's a couple different ways. There's a couple different ways to do it. One thing to keep in mind is that the house still has to appraise, right? So one option is to offer above list the amount that your buyer needs in closing so that the seller has the net that they need. So if it's a $150,000 house, the buyer needs $5,000 in concession to offer 120. I'm sorry, 155. I got my numbers. 155 and asking for 5,000 back. So the seller still has the net of 150. That's one option, but keep in mind it still has to appraise, right? And then this is where communication with your co-op agent is really pivotal. You can, dependent upon the relationship and the communication style and skills of the listing agent, if you're assuming you're the buyer's agent, Leslie, call the seller's agent and mention that your buyer would benefit or would like to have some concession. Is there a way that would be beneficial to the seller to structure it? Would they be open to providing seller concession? And then, is there a net that, you have to be careful. You have to be careful what you say, and they have to be careful what they say, because they have to be careful not to disclose too much. But I'm trying to think of a way that you can ask it. I want to be careful.
Right.
Amy, I have a question as it pertains to that, and maybe that will help.
Sure, please.
In a transaction, in a transaction that I've been working on, submitted a few offers, they have been rejected. Well, no response. So I'm assuming that they have been rejected. And through communication with the buyer, she was okay with it being rejected. Found a home she really, really likes. She's been pre-approved for 320. Is it disclosing too much when you're reaching out to the listing agent to say, hey, what is it? I see what it's listing. We're willing to we're willing to offer over listing, but the buyer needs some closing help. Mm-hmm. Should I, as the buyer representative, not disclose to the seller agent how much the buyer has been pre-approved, or should I, just so that we can have more communication or more dialogue about what the seller is willing to be open to or not? Should we disclose what they've been pre-approved for or not?
I would not start with disclosing what they've been pre-approved for. You want to be careful that you're not giving away all the cards.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
But there is a delicate way of doing it. Mm-hmm. And if you can write this down or record it or do something, this is the language that was gold for me when I learned it. I'm going to submit an offer. My buyer is very interested. They are strongly qualified. We would like to be competitive. Please present to your seller and get back to us with a response. We understand this might be the beginning of the conversation.
Do you mind saying that
I've done. Sorry.
Yeah, and then I'll break it down for you. So we're submitting it. So you always want to call the seller's agent and say, do you have an offer in hand? Has it been presented to your seller? When is the seller making a decision, or when are you presenting offers? I am representing a buyer who's very interested and has very strong qualification, is well qualified. We're submitting our offer. Please, there's some flexibility, right? So you're not saying what specifically is flexible. You're saying there is some flexibility. It could be settlement dates. It could be EMD. It could be offering more. It could be requesting less concession, right? There is some flexibility, means a whole lot of things. It opens the conversation. So there is some flexibility. Please present to your seller and get back to us with a response. We understand this is we're hoping, we understand, we're hoping something. This is the beginning of our conversation. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready for the discussion around it, because I want to let you make your notes, but I also want to circle back. Okay, cool. Thumbs up. So contact the seller's agent. We're totally jumping around. I'm supposed to follow the guidelines, but we're having a good conversation here. There are times to be rule followers, and real estate is definitely one of them, but teaching in class might not be. So, so contact the seller's agent, introduce yourself. You want to start the conversation with a relationship as often as possible. Let them know that you'll be an engaged part and that you're hoping to be able to partner with them and play matchmaker and have this be a win-win. Also and then ask the question, do you have offers in hand? And have they been presented? When will they be presented? So do you have offers in hand? They can tell you something that's not true, right? They can say yes if they don't. So stopping at that question is not enough for you as a buyer's agent to get information. Have they been presented? If they just say yes and don't say anything else, look, if you're looking at the scenario, the house is not listed as pending, it's not under contract, so they didn't come to terms. You can ask, are they in negotiation? Are they close to coming to terms? Listing agent will, in a way, without disclosing too much, let you know if there's still an opportunity to submit an offer. They might be like, yeah, we're really close, or or waiting for signatures. That tells you, unless you're really confident that it's a really strong offer, it might in this market be better to keep moving. However, if your buyer wants this house, it's not done until the last signature is on it. So you can say at that point, my buyer would like to submit their offer. Are you willing to still present this to the seller, even though you're, deep in the negotiation with the offer that you have in hand? They'll let you know. If they don't have offers in hand, or they haven't come to terms, or they're not close, the buyer's agent may say something to the effect of, there's still time to submit an offer. Find out when they'll be presenting so that you know what your time deadline is to get the offer in. And then you have the opportunity to start campaigning in a certain way. We can't submit letters, right? Because that's an ethical violation. So now your opportunity is to start talking about terms. And that is to let them know. So going back to the question of do you tell them how much you're qualified for if the offer is less than that? By letting them know that they have a strong qualification and they're flexible, you've already planted the seed that price could be negotiable. If price isn't the seller's number one priority, though, by saying we can go up or we can change the price, you might miss that they want to settle faster. So by just leaving it that we're flexible, you've left open for possibility until you get deeper into the negotiation conversation. And then by letting them know, we're submitting the offer, buyer is highly motivated, very interested in the house. Please present to your seller and get back to us with a response. That tells the seller's agent that you're looking for a counter, or that you're open to a counter offer. And getting back to us with the response, even if you have a seller's agent that's not a great communicator, even if they come back to you and say, we're not interested, that's still a negotiation. That's still like, what would it take to make it, you know, like what part of the offer wasn't viable for the seller? Not what would it take? Scratch that. What, you know, what part of the offer was not appealing to the seller? Find out what part of, you know, what the issue was. Was it settlement date? Was it inspection period? Was it inspection at all? Was it transform recordation? Was it that the, you know, they weren't sure about the lender, if it's an out-of-state lender or if it's a small lender? Sometimes sellers are concerned that you might not be able to get it to the settlement table. It's a risk for them. All of those different factors. But let them know that you're looking for a response. And that lets them know that it's still a conversation, even if the offer isn't accepted as is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions around that, or anything that you want me to go deeper on or repeat? Okay. Any other scenarios you want to talk through strategy? You guys are too easy on me. Okay. Let me minimize this and we'll go back. I do want to spend some time on asking questions. So we'll have to make sure that we leave some space for that. Examining the approach. You guys know this. Negotiation is a skill that can be learned and perfected with experience. Best practice is the 3Ps approach. One is prepare. Know your goal, know your client, think ahead. So going back to the, be informed, obey the laws. Like I said, there are sometimes to follow the rules and sometimes not. Real estate, you want to stay out of real estate jail. So follow the rules, know the laws. Be careful what you say and know what not to say. And inside of that, there's space for conversation. And the conversation is the relationship. Know your documents, know your contracts. Anytime you're negotiating for your clients, once you've negotiated the offer, getting it to settlement, a lot of the times you've got issues are either an inspection, appraisal, or that you've got two people who have two very different expectations based upon, you know, going in, the buyer and the seller, and the contract is what's going to protect your client's expectations. Make sure if there's anything that's negotiated, like Angel said, about like a chandelier or a conveyance or something that you've negotiated specifically, that it's in an addendum or it's represented and reflected in your contract and in your document. That's your best support there. But know the client's goal so that you can have the conversation with your co-op agent, that if you're the buyer's agent, your seller's agent, and know that, okay, like ultimately we want this house, we want this settlement date, we want this price or this net price, and I do need concession. And then all of those pieces are somewhat flexible, but you've got to know what you're working with and you've got to know what the client's goal is. Otherwise, you've got an agent who is often running and negotiating and the client's like, hold on a second, that's not what I want. If your client doesn't want the house at all costs and you negotiate up to, you know, like the max that their lender approved them for, and that's not what they wanted, then you're going to end up with some legal issues. So always no. Open-ended questions. Oh, questions. They're the most powerful thing. Most powerful thing. An example of open-ended versus close-ended. Open-ended have unlimited possibility, and it's an opportunity for you to get clarity. And it's also an opportunity for your client to really explore, because they might not know. They might not know that there's missing information until you ask them the question, and they self-discover in that process. Close-ended questions are typically yes or no. And it's a brick wall when you're trying to really get down to the goals and objectives and like the big why. These are great questions. What additional information should I know? What would you like to tell me? What do you need me to know that I haven't already asked? What's important to you about that? How do you feel about this? So if somebody gives you, I want to move in 30 days. What could be all of the different reasons they want a 30-day settlement date? You have no idea. What if it's like just something that the lender told them they could move in 30 days, but what if the seller wants to move in 6 weeks or a specific date because they're moving and that's when their house is going to be ready? So when someone says, you know, like, I want to close in 30 days, what's important to you about closing in 30 days? Well, I was told that I can't. Okay. Are you flexible with that? Are you open to considering a different settlement date if it works best for the seller? Make sense? What are some other open-ended questions that you could ask that could help you get down to details that could help you win the negotiation? There was one that I mentioned in, we were talking, so you're going to ask open-ended questions of the listing agent too, if you're the buyer's agent. Are there priorities that would make this a win-win for your seller? Understanding that will help you find the sweet spot for the offer. What would happen if? Why is this important to you? These are things that you could ask your client as well as your co-op agent. Talking to your client, what would happen if the seller responds back with a counter and it's this? Then you can start working on strategy with your client. And you can understand what your response might be to a counter based upon what is important and what the buyer would do in that certain situation.
Is it okay to ask if they're the seller why they need to sell as the seller, as a listing agent? Or should you
So
steer?
as a listing agent, so absolutely. So let's say, are you open to role play with me?
Yes.
Okay, would you be the seller? I'll be the seller's agent.
Okay.
Okay, we're on listing appointment. I show up looking at your beautiful home And I say, hi, Leslie, I really appreciate you inviting me into your home this evening. I'm very excited to partner with you and help you get your home sold. When you do move, where would you be moving to?
I would be moving one county over, closer to my children.
Closer to your children.
Yes.
Is that what's most important to you about moving one county over?
Yes, being closer to family.
Is that your so imagine you didn't say to be closer to your children, right?
Okay.
So like I'm moving one county over because I asked where. When you do move,
Okay.
where are you moving to?
Okay.
And you say one county over. What's important to you about moving one county over?
It's
Now
not
you
as
can tell me.
okay. Okay.
I just wanted to be careful because most times I wanted to be careful and show you the distinction between how to separate the two questions and how to ask it, because most of the time,
Mhm.
don't assume that your clients are going to offer that,
Okay.
right? So it's like they don't realize that you need to know that. They just know that they need your help in getting the house sold. They need
Okay.
someone's help in getting the house sold. They're trying to figure out if it's you or going to be somebody else.
Okay.
So like by asking the first question of when you do move, where would you be moving to? That gets the conversation started. That's a gold nugget conversation starter. I didn't create it,
Okay.
but like I've used it hundreds of times. And it also gets them visualizing their move. So they're
Okay.
getting emotionally connected to where they're going. So
Okay.
that's another secret. Okay.
Okay.
So Leslie, when you do move, where are you moving to?
Kent County.
Kent County. I know
Yes.
it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the state. What's
Yeah.
important to you about being in Kent County?
Being on the water, being close to the water, away from the traffic, closer to my children and family.
I love that. I'd love to tell me about your children. Tell me about your family.
They're grown and don't want to start families because they're working. So I want to move closer to them to be able to help.
Oh my gosh, what an amazing impact that would have.
Yes.
And like all of the impact that makes on their lives and on your life, what would it be like for you if you were able to be close enough to your kids to help them start a family and still be connected?
That would be awesome for me. And I would love to be there and be able to frolic in the water and fish.
Are you fish?
Yes.
My dad was a fisherman. I grew up fishing. It's such
Okay.
a magical thing to do.
Absolutely.
There was a fishing reference for everything. It's special, it's
It
family.
is.
A lot of magic happens with families when you're able to do that. Well, I love that, and I would love to partner with you and make that a reality.
Okay.
What's the time frame that you would like to be unpacked, feet up, and hugging your babies?
At least within 6 months.
Okay. And what's important to you about 6 months?
I would like to go right now while there seems to be a lot of properties that I've seen that I'm interested in.
Okay. So you've seen things that you could imagine yourself living in.
Yes.
And okay, understand. I love that. And we'll talk more about, helping you get connected with somebody who can help make that a reality for you in Kent County. And then also all of the resources that we'll need to make this a reality for you to get your house sold.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, and then obviously like that's listing appointment, that's a different Ignite session. But then it's, finding out, do you have an idea for list price? And we've got to look at all of the, listing a house and figuring out the list price is both an art and a science. We've got comps for the science part, and then there's art and like all of that. That's listing appointment stuff. But there's the continuation goes on about asking open-ended questions, but understanding my client, my seller's reason for selling
Mhm.
is paramount to success, because there's going to be a challenge in in every transaction you do, you're gonna hit a speed bump. And the difference between it being just a speed bump or being a brick wall is going to be understanding their needs, understanding their why, and understanding their priorities. So Leslie, for you, because you want to, we'll get the door, I'll keep talking. Because you want to be with your kids, you might be willing to accept less if it means that you can actually get there.
Right. Okay.
Or, right? Or you might hold out for more because you've got some time, because there isn't like a hard stop for you to get out by a certain time.
Right.
So I need to understand what your priorities are and in what order they're in. We're in a negotiation already as the seller's agent and the seller. It's me understanding what your needs are. And I'm only going to find that out by asking open-ended questions.
Okay. Thank
Is
you.
that helpful?
It is.
Okay, good. I love that. Any other questions? This is the fun part. Okay. Clarifying questions to set clear expectations. So Leslie, we'll use your, you can stay on mute if you want to, or you can come back off, either one. I love the engagement if you want to. We're again in the negotiation, even as a seller's agent and the seller, I need to understand your expectations and your needs, right? So we were talking about priorities. Now it's an opportunity for me to set expectations about like what things are going to look like, what the timelines could look like, so that I can accurately support you in negotiations with the offers that come in.
Okay.
Right. So you having clear expectations, I'll only understand what they are based upon asking clarifying questions. You can say, like, it's important to me to have this much. Okay, Leslie, what's important to you about selling the house for this price? It might be like, this is how much I owe on the house, and I'm not willing to come to the table with the extra to pay the difference. Don't want a short sale, right? Or in order to buy the house that I like, I'm going to need this much for a down payment. I've got this much in savings, but I'd like to have, you know, the other 10,000 from the sale of this house. Okay, so let's work through all of that. So asking those questions. What was your, if you're open to sharing with me, and you can, like, I don't want to force you to say anything you don't want to, but when you were asking if it was okay or reasonable to ask, you know, why the seller was moving, what was your concern? Because chances are other people are having the same concerns.
Okay. Honestly, knowing what you can ask, you don't, not wanting to cross the line of asking and knowing things. I know that you wouldn't disclose that because the seller will be your client, but just trying to understand at least a little better on if that's something that we want to focus on why they're selling, as opposed to if they have the money to sell, you know.
Got it. So one way to help everybody be comfortable when you have to ask those questions that you might feel could be a little invasive is, I'm going to ask you some personal questions. And it's also, I can help to make sure that this turns out the way that you need and want. If it's okay with you, I'm going to ask you a few personal questions and you tell me if you're uncomfortable. Getting permission up front is always a great way. And most of the time, even if they have hesitation, if you say that, and it's really setting an expectation, right? Like, I'm about to ask you some questions that might be a little personal. I promise you there's a reason. It's so I can really understand your needs and I can best advocate for them. because that's my job. I'm your advocate, right? I'm your representative in this process. You don't talk with the seller directly, right? So the better I can understand you and your needs, the better I can advocate for you. If there's any question that I ask that you're uncomfortable with, please say so. And we can talk through the reason. There might be another way that I can get this information, or there might be another way that I can understand your needs without going there.
Okay.
So right there, I've set expectations of why, and there are clear boundaries. And I've also empowered you to have clear boundaries and advocate for yourself if you feel like it's too invasive. I with all of the listing appointments I've been on, maybe 2 times had sellers say like, I'm not comfortable sharing that. But ultimately, I mean, it was never around why they were moving. They understand at that point that they need your help, and they want to tell you what you need to know so that you can best support them and help them. Okay. And as the seller's agent, you're not involved in their financials other than making sure that the house is not in short sale or foreclosure.
Okay.
Right. And the buyer's agent, that's handled by the lender. So having a strong partnership with your lender can do some heavy lifting for those uncomfortable questions too. Any questions on this? You guys get the clarifying questions, open-ended, the power of that? Like, give me a challenge. I can work through almost anything by asking clarifying questions. And that also allows you to set expectations. Would you guys be open to sharing some ahas? I'd love to hear what's making sense, what's hitting, and also if you've got any questions. Leslie, what did you hear in the conversation we were having? How do you feel now about asking those questions?
I feel a lot better.
Good.
I'm asking because I just know that I work with people who are trying to purchase houses. I'm dual career, and I just know that I do have problems getting my clients to open up about, why they are doing certain things, or even being transparent so that I can assist them to get to where they need to be to purchase.
Got it. Did the language that we just used in role play, did that seem helpful for you?
Mm-hmm. It does. Just to make sure that I'm getting a open-ended, that'll get them to talking on their own. It's kind of like an assessment, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to assess their needs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's like, when you've got somebody who walks into a store and they're like, I need to buy a gift. Okay, what do you have in mind? Well, I'm not comfortable telling you that. It's like,
Yeah.
You gotta share something with me. Otherwise I can't help you.
Right.
Like my, mental telepathy muscles aren't working so well today. So the more you can tell me, the better off it's gonna be. Okay, trying to get to the next page. Here you go. Learn paying attention to verbal and nonverbal cues. Keep quiet once you present the offer. Listen carefully to what the other party is saying. We'll go more into this. Stay calm and relaxed. Focus on your client's needs and give your offer the best chance. So much is communicated in nonverbal cues from your co-op agent that sometimes the most effective negotiations are done through what's not said. It's a fun little dance sometimes. Like, I'm the seller's agent and the buyer's agent says, do you have an offer in hand? What are my options? I can say yes, I can say no. I'm expecting one. Not just yet. What did I not say there? Right? But what did I communicate? You can also say, there's been a lot of interest. They can see online what the showings have been, so you've got to be careful. You can say there's been a lot of showings. There's been a lot of interest. I'm in conversation with a few agents. You also want to be careful that you don't give the buyer's agent the idea that there's no point in submitting an offer. So you want to let them know there's a sense of urgency to submit, but also that there's still time. So one way of communicating that is, I'll be presenting, let's say what's today? Is today Tuesday? I'll be presenting Thursday morning. I didn't say I have an offer. I didn't say I didn't have an offer. But what I did say is, if you want to submit an offer, you should get it in before Thursday morning. Just giving an example of the strength and additional ways of communicating. When you've submitted your offer and you've said, please present to the seller and get back to me with a response, that's communicating by, saying some things and not saying everything. So in that situation, you didn't say my buyer can increase the price, we can change the offer, but you did say, get back to me with a response. What you didn't say was, I'm expecting a counter, but you let them know that you're open to receiving a counter. Do you see what I mean? What you do say, what you don't say, and how you communicate directly and indirectly. Listen carefully to what's being said. So just like I was playing around with the words and dancing around certain things, listen in between the lines to when the other agent's talking. I was just negotiating. Oh, who was going to ask?
Oh, I was going to ask, is it like common practice for agents to kind of like sellers agents to kind of say that there's a lot of interest, or is we have offers and they really don't? Like, how do you know? Well, you wouldn't know if they're coming from a truthful place with it, or
you don't. I mean, so as a seller's agent, you don't want to say that if you don't have offers in hand. You want to speak honestly. If you've got a difficult seller and you've been presented with some offers and you're working on getting the seller to be reasonable and see the value in the offers, you wouldn't say that, but you could say, we have a few offers in hand. There's still time for you to submit your offer. I haven't directly said they don't fit my seller's needs, but I have disclosed that we've got offers in hand and disclosed that it's reasonable for you to submit an offer and think that it would be considered.
okay.
But you don't want to be deceitful. And I understand that's never anybody's intention is to be deceitful, but it may be the intent.
Make it look more appealing for some other people, like if you don't, to say, oh, well, yeah, I have XYZ,
You could say you have strong interest.
Okay.
Or you had a very busy open house and there were a few people who few people who expressed interest. Or
Okay.
do you know what I mean? Like there are ways of stating what has happened without saying that you've got, without being deceptive. And again, it's never the intention to be deceptive. You're trying to create a sense of urgency. You just have to be careful, because if it's not true, it, it can come back to bite you.
Okay. So straddle the fence, but don't go
Yeah.
over. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
Because let's say you don't have an offer in hand and you've got a hesitant buyer who's missed out 3 times because they were in multiple offers.
Yeah.
They're a little gun shy. They might not want to submit if they think you've got other offers, and let's say you don't. You won't see that offer.
Right.
So you won't have the opportunity to try and negotiate it. But you want to get them to create a sense of urgency. You can ask you can ask the buyer's agent, has your buyer been in the market? Have they submitted on other homes? Like, you can understand what's
Right.
going on there.
Right.
And you can say, I said this all the time, I would love to help make this house your buyer's new home.
Okay.
I can't start that process until you submit your offer.
Okay.
Right? We've got to see the offer. I'll present it to my seller. I can't get that started until I have the offer in hand.
Got it.
We've had strong interest. Right? So you're saying it without
Right.
misrepresenting.
Got it.
So Angel, what did you hear in that?
You want to always entice people to, especially if you don't have an offer, always entice people to submit. And if you do, not shy away from getting other offers by saying like, hey, we're already done. So just kind of like keeping it open and doing the best thing for your client, which is getting the best offer possible by just,
By being encouraging.
Right.
You want to be encouraging. So stay calm and relaxed. Understand that, there's a lot of emotion in the process, both on your if it's your seller or your buyer, and then also the other side. There's a lot going on at any time. The more calm you can be, the more you can respond to what's going on without contributing to the emotion or the chaos. And just have confidence in your ability to ask open-ended questions, to seek clarity, and to keep going. Even if the other side is not a strong communicator and you've submitted, say you're the buyer's agent, you've submitted and the seller's agent comes back and says, the seller doesn't accept the offer. Is the seller willing to provide a counter offer? Would the seller consider a counter offer? Has the seller accepted an offer? Like, those are kind of yes and no questions. You got to ask some yes and no so that you can understand where you stand in the process. And then you can figure out what the next open-ended question is. And that's that, would the seller be willing to submit, or the ultimate open-ended is buyer is open to receiving a counter offer. Is that an option? Would the seller be willing? So that specifically isn't an open-ended. However, getting their counter offer back allows you to start, the negotiation from a whole different place. Focus on your client's needs and do everything you possibly can to give the offer the best chance. You are not going to like every agent you work with as a co-op. There are going to be times where you are willing to walk away because every conversation is painful. Do everything that you can to advocate for your client, because at the end of the day, if you're the if you're the seller's agent, your client gets to walk away with their check or, with the freedom to move to go be with their family, stay connected to why your client needs this and what their motivation is, that will help you push through. And if it's a buyer that you're working with and this is their dream house, you're going to be willing to battle a lot of things along the way, keeping that in mind. Ask what and how questions. What's important to you about closing in 30 days? Right? And then their response is like your connection to them and helping them do that. What is it on page 12? My guide is different than yours. For those of you that have the participant guide, can you tell me what's going on page 12?
It is the 3 P's approach: position. It's an activity, do. Choose a partner and select who will play the part of the buyer agent and who will play the part of the listing agent.
And what's the conversation? You go back and forth.
There's a scenario. It lists a box with the buyer agent role and the listing agent role.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to read it?
Are you open to reading the scenario to me?
I don't mind. The scenario says the property has 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, and is listed at $350,000 in a well-established neighborhood. The house requires new carpeting throughout the first floor and a new garage door opener. 3 offers have been made, but all were below the asking price. And then there's 2 boxes, buyer agent role. Your buyers are making an offer at $340,000 for the house. They have been pre-approved. The buyers would like to close in the shortest time possible since they are moving from out of state and need a home for their family. Since they are leaving their appliances in their current home, the buyer would like all the appliances to be included. The listing agent role. Your sellers have raised their family in the house and are selling and have many friends and family in the area. Since their children are now grown, they no longer need the amount of space their current home provides and have purchased a home in Florida. They would like to give all appliances to their daughter, who has just gone through a divorce. They will not be moving until they have sold their current house. And although they would like to get to Florida as soon as possible, they are ready to stand their ground regarding the price.
Would anybody like to take the buyer's agent role? Or the seller's agent, and I'll be the other one. Any questions on where to start if you're not sure?
It just seems to me the scenario and the roles here, they're not related. Like the scenario is mentioning carpet and garage doors, but the roles are talking about negotiating over appliances.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting. It's a little confusing.
It is.
So if, yeah. So if you were, Sherry, if you were the buyer's agent, what would be a question, an open-ended question that you could ask the seller's agent to get clarity on where you're unclear?
Uh, I'm not sure. I don't even know what one has to do with the other, honestly. So are we asking about the appliances? Is that what you're referring to?
Forget the appliances.
Okay.
Hey, Amy,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'll take a stab at that, at the
Okay.
buyer agent.
sure.
Thank you, Annette.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so looking at the scenario, um, they listed the house at 350,000.
Uh-huh.
And let's see here. The house requires new carpeting throughout first floor, new garage door. 3 offers have been made, but all were below the asking price. Okay, so I guess the objection is here that there were 3 offers that were made, and they were all below the asking price. So, and I guess the asking price was, the offers came in at 340. So as the buyer agent, I would just ask the seller, the listing agent, I'm sorry, I would ask the listing agent, would the seller be willing to, I guess, let's see, how would I put this? Would the seller be willing to, oh gosh, this is a hard one. I had
Right?
it in my mind at first, but
Mhm.
now I'm like, oh my gosh.
So
So, okay, so if
sometimes trying to find a specific question is
yeah,
more challenging than an open-ended.
yeah.
So if
Oh,
you can, go ahead.
okay. So would the sellers be willing to counter offer, or to accept a lower offer below the listing price?
That's one. So that's one option. Corey's got a hand raised. Let's hear what
Okay.
Corey, what are you thinking?
So hello, everybody. So yeah, that was basically my question too. Could we ask if the seller would be, the seller's agent, would the seller be willing to reduce their price, the price of the house? Could we do that?
Is that so? Sorry, I apologize. I don't have that part in front of me. So tell me again, does it tell you what the objective is? Like, so what I heard was 3 offers have been submitted below asking and they haven't been accepted. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then is the objective for the seller's agent or the buyer's agent to get an offer accepted?
Yes.
Under asking.
Under asking, correct.
Okay. So if you're trying to get it, I love this conversation. This excites me. I geek out over this stuff. Okay. So bear with me because this is where magic happens, right? Like this is where you come out the hero for your client. Okay. So what could you ask the seller if you're going in with an under list price offer? What do you need to know? If they've already turned down several others, what do you need to know?
What would they be willing to accept if there wasn't the price that they initially wanted to sell a home for?
Yeah, so you want to know that. And I don't know if a seller would really tell that out, like, here's the offer that I want. I mean, there's a possibility. There are some sellers who are like, this is what I want, nothing less. So sometimes listing agent will tell you that. But what's another way of asking, what else is important? I'm kind of giving you the answer. In addition to list price or the
Are there
net
any,
offer,
how important are terms for you? Other terms as far as
Are there-
closing and
are there other terms that would help the offer be a win-win for the seller? Like, let's say, okay, here's just to give, like, if we can get some altitude with this and look at it from, 30,000 foot view. Let's say the seller is listed for, I don't know, I'm just, because I don't have it in front of me. Let's say it's 400, which, okay, let's just say it's listed at 400. They don't owe anything on it. And the offers that they got in were whatever it was, whatever you have in the manual. But that's not the most important thing. They need to move in, they need to live there for another 3 months. And the other offers had like 30-day closes. Well, of course they're going to reject it because it's not the right settlement date. But we don't know that. We just make the assumption that they rejected the offer because of the offer price, but we actually don't know that.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
Does that help to give a different perspective?
Mm-hmm. For me, it does, yeah. Because if the other offers, if they were rejected because of the 30 days, maybe a counter offer might allow more time, and maybe that's what they need is the time.
Exactly. But we don't know that unless we ask. Are there other, like, what are the seller's priorities? What's most important to your seller? I'm the buyer's agent. I'm talking to seller's agent. What's most important to your seller? Outside of list price or outside of offer price, are there other terms that your seller needs in order for this to be a win for them? The myth around negotiation is that somebody wins and somebody loses. That's not the case. It doesn't have to be. There are win-lose negotiators. There are going to be people who have to feel like they've won and you've lost in order for them to win. But that's not the majority, and you don't have to be like that. And the whole process doesn't have to be, somebody doesn't have to lose. There is actually a way that both people can win, and that's what we're after. So both people winning is your buyer gets the house for the price that they're willing to pay and or that they can pay, and they are able to settle in 90 days instead of in 30 days because they'll go month to month in their apartment instead of moving out at the end of their lease in 30 days. Like things are flexible, or that could be flexible, but you won't know until you ask those questions.
And Amy,
And that, yeah.
Specifically speaking of both parties winning, I just wanted to come back to some clarity for this example, because I'm just curious how this would be resolved, because the buyer's agent is offering a lower price and wants appliances. This listing agent's clients, they won't move until the home is sold, and they need to give their appliances to their daughter that they're moving to Florida with. So I'm like, the buyer's agent is already at $340 with asking for appliances. And this listing agent's sellers are keeping their appliances, having to move to Florida, and they can't move until the current house is sold to us. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just wondering how that would get resolved.
So so I'm such a visual person. It's so hard for me to get these details by listening. This is when like your learning method gets in the way.
Yeah.
The buyers want the appliances and the seller want to give their appliances to the kids. Is that right?
That's what they want to do. I can screenshot it. This is like
Can
literally,
you please?
yes, because I'm sitting here. I don't know if anybody else feels the same way,
Okay.
but I'm sitting here like, what is happening?
We could, Angel's going to text it to me. We could get creative And there's always, bear with me for 1 second, because I really do need to see this.
Yeah, I just sent it. I was like confused a little bit. A little
Okay.
just
Got it. Okay, hold on. Buyers are making an offer. Buyers would like to move because since they're moving from out of state and need a home for their family. Okay, so they have a time sensitive, so there's a time sensitive for the buyer. Okay, since the buyers, okay, thank you for doing this. Sellers have raised their family in the house. Um, does it say what it's listed at 350. Okay, so wow, this is kind of complex.
yeah, I was like, I'm so
The
confused.
house requires new carpeting, the first floor and garage door. Throughout the first floor. Okay, so the reason why it's telling you what it needs. So this is really helpful because now I can explain. The reason why it's telling you what it needs, that the house requires new carpeting throughout the first floor and a garage door opener. So that tells you that it's listed at 350, but whether we don't know yet, and we won't, but we don't know if 350, the price is adjusted for it needing new carpet and not having a garage door opener, or if 350 is in pristine condition and we as the buyer's agent would want to submit an offer that accounted for the carpet that needs to be replaced and the garage door opener that is missing. So that's where you start to look at the condition of the house in relation to the list price. And then also comps that will tell you if 350 is adjusted for the condition or not. Buyer's agent, you're submitting an offer for 340. You'd like a quick close and you kind of need a quick close. Unless you could go into an apartment and do a month to month. In the meantime, it depends on how much you want the house. But these are all things to consider when making an offer, and also understanding, going back to Leslie, what you were saying, like it's really important to know what the buyer and seller both want and need. If this is the house that this buyer really wants, are they willing to go into a short-term rental for a month and keep all their stuff in storage because they are willing to wait for this house for another 2 months? Do you know what I mean? Like knowing those pieces and those factors will help you get the win for the client. As the seller's agent, they're not in a rush. They're waiting for the right price, right? And they want to give the appliances to their daughter. This is a little complicated. I would say, one, what's the buyer qualified for? You're making an offer for 340 and we know you're pre-approved, but we don't know what you're pre-approved for. So these are questions I would, or like scenarios that could be a possibility. Finding out what the priority is. We don't know. I would assume the other offers were rejected. It's possible the other offers were rejected because they had a quick close and they were under the price. If these guys are willing to wait, or if your buyer is qualified to go up to 350, you could always say, like, let's say 350 isn't, here's the bottom line. There's a ton of variables, and you really need to understand what everybody's win looks like. For the seller, it's interesting that they want to give these used appliances to their kids, but like, you would not believe what's important to some people. Like, you can get appliances, you can get an appliance package for what, 4 appliances for like 2,500. You can get a good deal like Best Buy, Home Depot. So you could possibly negotiate that in. You could ask for seller concession and use the money from concession to go buy appliances. Perhaps you want new appliances and these are old. There are so many different directions to go to negotiate. I would say like that's where you need to really understand what's most important. Let's say for the buyer, the most important thing is the 30-day close. If the seller really needs, these appliances to go to their daughter, like get the concession if possible and get yourself new appliances and let the daughter have these that they're emotionally attached to.
Okay.
And if it's carpet, like let's say 350 is not adjusted for condition, you make the point to the seller's agent. 350 in the neighborhood comps is in pristine condition. Carpet needs to be replaced, and and also the garage door opener. To account for that, we would be submitting an offer at 340. However, we want to make this a win-win. So we're willing to submit an offer at 350 and request 3,000 in concession. And that allows the buyer to buy appliances. You don't have to tell the seller that when you're submitting the offer, but that allows them. And you can say, this way we can get appliances, find the offer price that works for you, and your daughter can have the concession. I mean, your daughter can have the appliances. Michelle, are you nodding? Yes, you're nodding. Corey, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so I was going to ask, in reference to the carpet, like how would we have an idea how much it may cost to replace the carpet?
You can call flooring people and find out what it would cost. I mean, and if so there's a difference between not liking the aesthetic of the carpet that's there and it being like worn down.
And I just had a thought about that because as the listing agent, I would like to have a conversation with the seller because there were 3 offers that came in, but they were all below the asking price. So I would probably go into a script mode with the seller to say something to the effect of, because if just hypothetically, if the house, we did the comps and all that, and there's some other homes that are selling for that price and that range, that 340 price. So I would, have a conversation with my seller and, again, like I said, go into script mode and just say, hey, we've had 3 offers that came in below. There are no other offers in the pipeline. And I understand your, the situation, whatever. But suppose there were no other offers that would come in. How would that make you feel?
So careful with that, because You could also have a seller that looks at you and says, that's your job to get me the offer that I want. So
Right.
right. So
And
I-
that's why I mentioned the comps,
Right.
comps in the area at that, that 340 range,
Mhm,
only because 3 different offers had come in at
Mhm.
that price.
mhm.
So this is where setting expectations is really important. Expectation conversation that you'd have in the listing appointment or in the beginning of the listing process is we cannot dictate the market, we can only interpret it,
Exactly.
right? So it's an art and a science.
Mhm.
And we talked about pricing as being an art and a science. The science is the comp, and the art is there's another piece of the formula, and that is the buyer's perception of value. So if you've got 3 buyers that submitted an offer all around the same place, it might be that this is their perception of value in comparison to what else is on the market. So let me ask you, Mr. Seller, if this is the highest offer we end up getting and you pass on it, 30 days from now, we're still on the market. How are you feeling? It's another way of asking, Annette, the same thing that you were saying without saying like, this is the highest offer. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
what, or like, we don't get another offer. It's the like future pacing the negative. And
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard negative future, positive future.
No.
So the positive future was like, when you do move, where are you moving to? Negative future is 30 days from now, if we look back and this was your highest offer, we're still on the market, how are you feeling? They could say, I'm fine because I won't sell for anything less. So that tells me that I just hold on to it. If it's an investor, I'll rent it. Or if it's a person like, I don't need to move, I was just curious. Or like, I'm fine to wait for 6 months and I'll try it again. You also have the person who might look at that and go, I don't want to still be on the market and dealing with this in 30 days. I'm willing to consider something else. And that's when you can ask open-ended questions. If we were to accept an offer at 340, what else needs to be present in this offer so that it's a win for you?
Okay.
Like, what are the other terms, kind of thing?
Amy, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a scenario where multiple offer and my buyer needs closing help. Is it wise to, okay, I've called the seller agent and they have expressed that they have, several offers and pretty much gauge whether or not my offer was, anyway, multiple offer scenario, and my buyer needs help with the down payment. So we pretty much present our highest and best offer, and with the assumption that, inclusive with we asking for closing help as well. Is that wise to do?
It all depends on, you just don't know what the seller needs to make it work and what's a win, right? So if the net price of offer minus concession, if the net price fits their needs and they need to change settlement date or they want to play around with other things, it might work. You don't know unless the seller's agent is willing to share with you, or in that situation, you can do the same thing. My buyer's flexible on other terms. They need concession. Is the seller willing to consider an offer? Would you please present and get back to me with a counter? Like, worse, like, submit your offer, ask for a counter offer, let them know you want to continue the conversation and see what they counter. That's
Okay,
like
although
asking an
they have other
open-ended
offers
question.
in hand.
I mean, if this is the house that your buyer wants, do everything that you can to make it happen, to advocate within your power,
Okay,
right? Like, does it hurt? Does it hurt anyone to do this?
no. Mm-mm. Gotcha. Thank you.
I mean, there are some buyers don't want to, they've been hurt, they've been burned, they can't handle the heartbreak. Like, some buyers don't have the tolerance to be part of a multiple offer situation. And some are like, yeah, throw my hat in the ring, like, let's see what happens. You don't know what the other offers are. They might also have concessions.
That's
Unless the seller's agent comes to you and says, the other offers don't have concession, would you like to adjust your offer? But now you've got information, not just assumptions.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And that does, yeah, my pleasure. And it doesn't, like, here's the thing, we have all been trained by life, like, don't be a problem, don't ask too many questions, right? Like, you walk this fine line of being polite, like, stop all of that. Stop it. Ask the question. Be that person. Because you'll walk away with a ton of information that the person who won't ask questions for fear of being a bother won't know. And so you'll win most of the time. You'll win the opportunities most of the time. You don't know unless you ask the question. Don't let assumptions be your roadblock, because you're in your own way. You're your own sabotage. Make sense? Any other questions? I love this stuff. And I'm noticing the clock is ticking.
Can you repeat real quick the positive future versus the negative future? Like,
Sure. Positive future, negative future. So there's, so it's taking somebody into the future and looking at positive consequences and negative consequences. It's getting them emotionally attached. There's a whole quadrant. Positive present, negative present. Let's see if I can take you guys through this. It's been a little bit. I think it's negative present, positive future, negative future. There are ways of connecting the dots. So, like, what's working for you now, what's not working for you now, right? So, like, where is your current situation not working? Where is it negative? Where is your current situation? Like, what would have to change currently right now in order to make that a positive situation? When you're dealing with moving, now you're dealing with the future of, like, when you do move, where are you moving to? What's important to you about that? What impact does that have on you? What impact does that have? If we go back to Leslie's situation, what impact does that have now on, second and third generation? And, like, everybody being able to live together as a family and have those amazing memories of growing up, playing around in the water and fishing. That's positive future. Now, let me ask you, take that current situation, right? I've just taken you into this, like, amazing, heartwarming, exciting scenario. Now, if we don't end up getting an offer on the house that matches your request, the comps just don't support it, let's say the buyer doesn't come through, and you're still in this house a year from now, how are you feeling? What are you thinking? Do you see positive future, negative future?
that's a good way to look at it too sometimes.
Yeah. And, like, the seller's response could be like, well, I don't know, my kids are considering moving here, so maybe if I don't find that house in Kent County, like, maybe they'll just move here in a year. Okay. You mentioned being near the water was really important to you and having the, experience fishing. Like, there's reservoirs and lakes around here, but Does that mean that you'd be interested in moving to a waterfront property here? You know, like what, it was so important to you, what has changed or what could change to where that isn't the need or the priority anymore. So going from negative or positive future to negative future and then inspect the gap. What might have changed? What could change? Is that, you know, I don't want you to give up on your dream. Maybe there's another way. Any questions around that? It's really, really, really powerful in working through negotiations, both with your clients and with a co-op agent. We are running out of time. I looked at the clock last and it was 7 o'clock and I was like, oh, we still have a whole nother hour. And now all of a sudden we are running out of time. I do want to talk about counter tactics, and that's what's next. We've done some role play, so I feel like we got a little ahead of ourselves with that. I feel okay moving through that really fast. Daily success habits. It looks like that's a conversation you guys have had. Add 10 contacts a day, have 10 conversations, 10 written notes, preview 10 homes per week. Role play and script practice. I'm going to give you guys some script practice activities. Okay, so let's do counter tactics, and then we'll do some skill development work. Okay. So sorry. Okay. Once your client has agreed upon a major concession, the other party will. Okay. So things to watch out for in negotiations. This is recorded. I'm gonna go fast here, but if you can get the recording, if you weren't able to get all of the notes, because this is all really important. And I want to help you guys with this as much as possible. A lot of times when something to watch out for in negotiation is if one party feels like they got taken advantage of or the other person got the best of them, they're going to try and catch up somewhere. For example, let's say list price. Seller's like, oh, I feel like I gave the house away, or I feel like I let the buyer take it for less than I could have gotten, less than I wanted to sell it for. Now it comes time for home inspection negotiations, and the buyer's looking for credit. Seller's going to be like, I gave enough. Consider that when you're negotiating on both sides. Understand the mindset of the buyer and seller in the negotiation, because just getting it accepted isn't the only place that you guys are going to have to be working together to find the win. If one person feels like it was a win-lose in one of those, they're going to try and catch up. It's just human nature. So keep that in mind and set that expectation with both clients, buyer and seller. And also sometimes it's good to say, we got the price that we need. Some of these issues in home inspection isn't that big of a deal. I want to be careful how much we're asking, or how much we're asking for. Same thing if buyer paid more than they really wanted to in the contract price, they might think like, okay, well, then if I'm going to pay that, then I want all of these repairs done, or I want a credit for the things that need to be handled. So just understand that your negotiation just starts with the contract. Any questions on that one? I'm looking at what's on page 13 as potential objections or obstacles. Other party tries to pass a problem onto you, for example, co-op agent. So let's say you're listing agent and the buyer submits an offer and wants your client to pay all closing costs because they can't afford it. There's another way of trying to find the win there. And that's not like, we can't afford it, so I'm going to make it your responsibility. It's help with the closing costs are really important to my buyer. Is there another way that we could, compensate the seller or find the win so that, it can work for both sides? And be careful with good cop, bad cop. It's important in order to a strategy. So like you might have, if you have two people listed as seller, two people on the, two people are working together and buyer, you could have partners, you could have spouses, you could have friends, you could have, if it's an investor, you could have, business partners. It's important to have both people present for the initial appointment and understand the motive and priority and the why for both people, and continue to bring them back to that when you've got a challenge. If one person is a stronger decision maker, it's important for you as the agent to understand that, because you first have to work through the challenge with your client before you can go back into the negotiation and work with your co-op to find the win-win. So understand both people need to be present so that you can have one conversation. Otherwise, you can end up being handed off of like, I don't know, I need to ask my partner. Well, they said no. Well, you're not dealing with the partner who allegedly said no, you're just hearing it secondhand. And you don't have the ability to ask them what's important to you about not accepting this, or what's important to you about standing firm and finding other ways of not having that be a brick wall and a roadblock. Any other obstacles that you would like to hear a strategy for before we start wrapping up? I've loved my time with you guys. I can't believe how fast this has gone. Okay. Guys, ready for some skill development homework? When somebody asks you a question, start responding what's important to you about that. Anyone and everyone. I told you my son wanted a new lacrosse stick. What's important to you about a new stick? It was actually pretty surprising when I started doing that. I took a class, certified negotiation expert. And this was after I'd been in the business and negotiating for a couple of years. And that's where I learned that. What's important to you about that? And then understanding every request has a priority and intention and like an emotional connection to it. When someone stands firm and they're stubborn about it, chances are it's the emotion. So what's important to you about it gets to the emotion, and it helps you to start asking questions first, open-ended, rather than backing yourself into a wall or missing it all by stopping with your assumption. You guys think you can do that?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I love it. I love it. Yay, thumbs. And then also start making lists of questions. So make your list of questions, and you'll notice most of them are yes or no questions. And then on the right side of the page or right under it, however it works best for you, figure out a way to reword it so that it's open-ended. So like going to the carpet that needs to be, that the buyer perceived as, or the note said it needed to be replaced. An open-ended question, if I were the buyer, if I were the buyer's agent, like saying to my buyer, so initially I was thinking, like, could you live with this carpet? If you have a different priority, rather than asking for, a reduction in offer price, are there other things that are more important to you, or are there other ways that you could tolerate the carpet, and we could ask for a concession back for appliances. But like, there's an open-ended question is like, are there other things, or like, what's important to you about having the carpet replaced? Is there a scenario where you don't replace the carpet right now and you save the money there? Or is there a scenario where you could live in the house without replacing it? What does that look like? What would it take for that to happen? It's a new skill. It's not easy at first. The more you do it, the more you build the muscle, the easier it does get. If you're stuck, start with the yes or no question and then play around with it. I would love to hear one thing that you guys are going to take away into your life and implement. Yes.
Listen, I've already been using that, what's important to you about that thing at work. I ask my coworkers that all the time. And it's interesting to hear the reactions, because then they stop and they think and they go into depth, and then you're like, okay, I can tailor whatever I'm about to say around what it is that you think is important. So that's been really, really helpful. But I stole that from you a couple of weeks ago. So
you did. And I love what you just said. I love what you just, thank you guys for the information in the chat. That's really good to know. I'm glad you liked the examples. Oh, thank you guys. Angel, I love what you just said, and what you said, like, people will give you an answer that's like a gut reaction without really thinking deeply about it. And when you say to them, like, what's important to you about that, or help me understand your priority, it makes them sometimes stop and think. So they don't really know. And it really helps you to get on the same page. Anything else that you guys want to know, or any feedback? I'd love to see either in the chat or just unmute and share. I don't want to cut you off and end. I can stay for a couple minutes if you need. You're welcome, Brittany. Thank you. Great scenarios and advice. The aha was to start asking more open-ended questions. Yes. And don't be worried if it feels uncomfortable, because it is something completely new. And developing this skill will take you far in your career in real estate. Thank you, Leslie. I really appreciate you being bold and being very interactive with the conversation. Mariah, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you enjoyed and it was helpful.
Thank you so much. You learned some great stuff tonight. I can really use. Thank you.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Well, I hope to hear great things about you guys and to hear about your success. And Alana, who I believe is the organizer of Ignite, is a dear friend of mine. So if you guys have any questions and you'd like more information, I'm happy to come back and be a resource for you.
Thanks,
Okay,
Amy.
guys. Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.